Hello Internet, welcome to the channel, and in today's video we are building a habitat or enclosure for the Alpine Ibex. I want to start by making the point that this is by far the quickest habitat build so far in our FWP Wildlife Park, especially in the Temperate Hills. Even though the lemur habitat near the entrance was fairly quick, this beats it by a few minutes. The total build time for this habitat is only 26 minutes. So if you want a really quick and yet, in my opinion, really effective looking habitat for something like the Alpine Ibex, then make sure you watch this video and kind of take some inspiration from it. So what I'm doing is just using some fencing to begin with to mark out where I'm going to have this habitat. I have chosen to put it in this small gap just below where our pronghorn and American bison are, and it's got quite a nice slope, this habitat, which is going to be excellent for a creature that normally lives up in mountains and stuff, launching itself across rocks and whatnot. Having that natural gradient in terms of height is really going to help with the aesthetic that we want for this habitat. Now we're going to be keeping the front of the habitat made from chain link fence, allowing our guests to be able to see the animals nice and easily, but at the back and the sides we're going to turn it to the wooden logs. And the reason I do this is just to have a bit of depth to the habitat. Having the fences be a little bit darker than the stuff that's going to be going in the habitat, which is going to be various plants and rocks and stuff, having it be a little bit darker really helps to set them apart and make all the stuff in the middle stand out a little bit, and having it be a natural kind of material at the back as well helps to kind of suggest that this is a natural landscape. At least that's what I'm telling myself. I've got to justify it somehow, haven't I? If I'm going to talk about it in a video, I need to come up with reasons. We're just going to pop the door to the side, and unlike all my other habitat builds so far, I'm not going to be making a habitat house. There isn't going to be a dedicated area for these animals to go and sleep. Instead, I'm going to be using the terrain and some environmental features that I'm going to add to kind of create a hard shelter, but nothing too, I guess, man-made looking. The aim for this habitat is for it to look really, really natural, as if though it was here before we even got to the zoo. As for the viewing gallery for the specific habitat, it's going to be the exact same path that the guests are currently using in order to get to the tops of our temperate hills and to be able to see our mixed deer enclosure. So we're just going to pop a couple of the education boards on the railings in between the benches and stuff, just so that our guests know what animals they're looking at. I'm not going to bother with adding any more donation bins, as there are already some there for the deers, and the guests will just go to the other side of the path in order to throw money in to donate for the Ibex as well. So it's unnecessary to just clutter this area with even more items. We're just going to try and keep it a bit more open, because it's going to get very crowded up here. Yeah, I don't really plan for that kind of thing. Maybe this path should have been a bit wider. Oh, look, here we go. The Ibex are about to arrive, which means that we can start to alter the terrain to meet their terrain distribution needs and start to add some plant life. So perhaps unsurprisingly, they like a lot of rock in their habitat, but a little bit surprisingly, at least to me, was that they're quite a fan of short grass. I just pictured these guys being up in mountains and just bouncing off rocks, not really worrying about grass, but they've got to eat something, haven't they? So obviously they're going to have grass. Yeah. It's not too hard to get the terrain distribution needs at an appropriate level. Then we can move on to doing some plant life. But instead of concentrating on plants in this habitat, we are mainly going to be focusing on rocks. And as the rocks are going to be such large features and they are going to be taking up a lot of space in this habitat, it's best to get down our enrichment and feeding items first. This means that we can work around them rather than get our habitat to a place that we're really happy with and it looks really cool, but then not be able to put these essentials in place. That would be obviously quite awful. Right from the get-go with this enclosure, I knew that there was something that I wanted to do, and that was to make a large kind of archway in the middle of the habitat that was made entirely out of rock that could be climbed on, at least at the lower levels. We don't want our animals getting really high up and then jumping out of the enclosure. and it will also supply a little bit of a hard shelter. So a hard shelter can be made basically out of anything, as long as there is cover. And that is exactly what I'm doing with this, by having the rock suspended in the air, reaching over and creating a little bridge kind of shape, this archway sort of thing. It will actually be making a hard shelter, which is going to count towards our animals' welfare, which is excellent. As you can see, I am starting by using the really large rocks at the bottom to create these two sort of what should we call them? Stronghold, like footings. Yeah, they're footings basically for the archway. I'm going to be sketching it all out using the larger rocks to begin with, and then once we're happy with the general shape and stuff, I'll come back later with the smaller rocks and litter them around to add a bit of detail. Variation is what will make this look quite natural. If it's all really big rocks, it will just look a little bit clunky. But if you make sure to come back with smaller rocks later and just spread them around the bottom and stuff, it will look quite a bit better. And the reason for that is because obviously in nature, if these massive rocks are here, they will be weathered over time. Little bits will chip off. They might bang into each other from like landslides or the wind and stuff like that. And little bits will chip off from time to time. It just will happen. They will degrade and fall apart. So having smaller pieces near the bottom makes a lot of logical sense, and it will help to make this look a lot more natural and less man-made. But if you do want a man-made approach, if you want it to look that way, like a faux rock kind of thing, and you can't wait for the faux rocks to come in the aquatics pack at the end of May, then by all means just use really big rocks that will get that kind of fake sort of aesthetic across, if that is what you're after. Now, even with just having those rocks in place, you can really see how this enclosure is going to look, and it really starts to create a cool atmosphere, at least in my opinion it does. So now we're going to move on to the plant life, and this time I'm going to keep it more to quite dry looking bushes and stuff, with a few flowers around the crevices between the rock and the ground, because that's where moisture is going to hide, seeds will get lodged in those gaps and all that, and you're going to get a denser kind of concentration of wildlife in those crevices, because that just would happen in the real world. So that's what I'm doing. I'm also going to use a few broken trees and lay them down across the rocks and stuff, just to kind of suggest that there is a history here. Plants have lived here, it's kind of dried up and stuff, and they've all fallen over and whatnot. I don't know, I just think it adds quite a nice variation in terms of what kind of wildlife we've got in this habitat. Instead of just having a lush, rich plant life everywhere, it will help to give this habitat quite a distinct look, because so far most of our habitats have been quite lush and full of life, rich plant life and stuff, whereas here we're going to really push this idea of having quite a few dead plants and have it look quite dry. So I'm going to sit back and let you enjoy, and I will see you in a minute. Thank you so much for having watched this video. I really hope you enjoyed this super quick build. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and potentially subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this appearing in your subscription feed. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.